I know you want to buy cheap real estate. Let me show you how. But let me show you where most people mess up at when trying to buy some cheap real estate. So I have a couple steps for you and a couple mistakes that you want to avoid while trying to invest into real estate. And we're talking about auctions, we're talking about like liens and stuff of this nature, foreclosure, all of that stuff. Avoid buying your first property online, so like Zillow, Realtor.com. Avoid buying your first not rental property, but your first investment property with a pricey, like, don't do it. It's too pricey. You don't want to spend 300,000 on an investment, 500, 400,000 on the investment trying to buy a home. What I'm trying to tell you is there's cheaper ways to do so. But while doing those cheaper ways, let me tell you some things that you should avoid during these tax auctions. So number one thing to avoid is not studying the property. If you're taking the time to go buy a property or bid on a property at these auctions, you need to know exactly what you're bidding on. And right now we're just talking about land for first-time investors. If you're a first-time investor, you got under 5,000, you can buy you some land, you can purchase you some land from the tax auction. I can show you some ways to do that. The thing here is, if you don't research these properties, it's not going to be to your benefit, because some of these properties you're buying can't even be built on. Some of these properties you're buying have no accessible tracks to them, so you have no way to get to the property while driving a car. These are some of the stuff you have to know to actually invest in these things. You need to know who previously owned it. You need to know what the previous taxes were. You need to know what the previous assessments were for how much the land would actually go for. Because you could get in an instance where when you're overpaying, and we're going to talk about this later, overpaying for a land, and you're overpaying for a piece of property that you think is more valuable than what it is. But because you didn't do your research, you don't know how valuable the land is and what the land value is. And now you're stuck in a bind trying to figure out why you bought this property, why you bidded on this property. Don't bid on something that you have done zero research on. I don't care how good it looks. If this is your first time, you do not bid on what just looks good or looks sexy at auction. You need to take the time to do some research. You need to take the time to thoroughly look through these things to make sure you're not buying a property with a sinkhole next to it. Understand what is going on in the community and understand what is going on with the land. Because when we find these secluded pieces of land, there's a lot of different things. It can be a dump site. So you have to know these different codes that is there, that real estate uses to let you know what a land use is used for. They will literally tell you, but if you don't do the research, you're going to catch yourself in a bind, and you're not going to be able to use the land for the purposes you thought you were going to build on. So let's say you go to buy a land and you're like, okay, we can put a trailer home on it. We could put a container home on it. We can do these types of things, and yeah, we can do this. We got the investment, we got the land. And you go to find out you can't do none of it because the land can't be built on. Now what do? So you have to focus in when you're going to these auctions. It's more than just looking at cheap properties and taking them and buying them. Because I do a lot of research on this, and I see a lot of times the same properties that are bought at one time are the same properties that are back on a lien auction at another time, because companies or people didn't know what the heck to do with them. So now they just taking these properties just to buy a bunch of properties, and there's nothing they can do with them. So there's just lands just sitting there. They don't farm. They don't dump. They don't know how to make money off of that stuff. So why would they invest into those lands that is not going to yield them anything just to take the land? There's no profit in it. When you're investing, you're wanting to get profit off of this, whether it's a long-term thing or a short-term thing. But if you can't build on it now, it's not going to change in the future. So understanding these small tactics will help you not make this first mistake and picking something that isn't profitable. Number two, not checking for other liens or other things that are against the home. This is a tough one because this comes with thorough research and understanding what exactly is going on with a property. Now, for a first time investor who has that 5 grand that is trying to buy a piece of land, this is not something be that will harm you necessarily, because this is more so talking about with like homes, having a house on the property, multiple people living in there. Say we got a husband and a wife, and all different. There's different financial things for everything, and there's a lien for everything. Now, when a property goes to a tax lien, let's say, for instance, there's this house, and there's a couple. Jimmy and Jay is the lady. So let's say Jimmy and Jay are a couple. They have a house, and this home that they live in, has a lien on it. It has a construction lien, mortgage lien, tax lien. Which of the three you think is gonna put that house up the fastest? The tax lien overrides everything. So let's say they get the tax lien and it's about to go up to auction. So the house goes up and let's say they owe 2,500 on the house for a tax lien. They have that redemption time to pay that, or to reach out before the auction. And let's say they didn't do that. So let's say that this property goes to auction. And just to make everything better, let's say it's 2 grand instead of 2,500. Let's say they owe 2 grand. So the property goes to auction. And let's say someone bids 1 grand and gets the property. Or someone bids 2 grand and gets the property, 2 grand that right on the head, and gets the property. Well, if the house had other liens on it, you would have to do research to see if you would have to pay those liens. And depending on what state you're in, you would have to see if it is even feasible to get this house with the other stuff that is against it. Now, let's go to a different scenario. And in Florida, this for sure. So let's say 50,000 was the bid at the auction for the home, and it's 2 grand that is owed. Well, now the money from the 50 is going to be subtracted, and the 2 grand is what's going to cover the lien. So now the 48 left is now going to be able to clear what is left for those other liens and other things that is up against the house and other things that the owner has. So now when you purchase that property, you will have more leeway. But if you don't understand that, you could be getting yourself into some trouble, and then you could be purchasing something that is more of a liability than it is an asset. Number 3, please do not trespass. If you're looking and searching at these properties as you should, and doing your due diligence as you should, and understanding where exactly your properties are as you should, you need to not trespass, because this is still against the law. So if you're going to look at these lands and you got your 5 grand or below, and you're like, man, I see a piece of property that I like, I want to go check it out, be very careful, because they're on tax auction for a reason. These are properties that other people own. So you're not allowed to just go on people's properties just because you're bidding on them and you think you're going to win. And even when you win the property, it isn't automatically yours. That you still have to sign the deed for the property to be put in your name. So you have to understand this is a whole legal process. The property isn't just yours. Understand the legal process of the whole thing before you even step foot on trying to buy something that you don't know nothing about. So don't trespass on these people's properties. And then to go back to this, as I would say, for the bigger time people who want to get into it, don't walk up to someone's home trying to see all that is wrong with it or what you can fix and all of this stuff without talking to somebody, previously talking to somebody. You don't want to invade someone's space, and they're already having to give up their home because of a lien that they couldn't pay, that isn't always expensive. So have sympathy. Understand Understand what you're doing before you get really happy and eager to do some of this stuff. And understand state laws and what people can do to people for trespassing. So understand those types of things and don't fall into that temptation of doing that type of stuff. So don't trespass on people's stuff and don't trespass on people's property. Research these properties. The county will have enough on the properties for you to do what you need to do. And then you can check for like construction reports, and you can check for like licenses people got to get things done in the house, all of that type of stuff. But be smart about what you're wanting to do and how you go about it, and do not trespass. Number 4, overbidding on bad properties. This is seen a lot, and I've seen it in person, and I've seen it online. Sometimes people think of an auction as an end-all be-all, as one and done. Auctions aren't necessarily that. Like, you have opportunities to go to the auction again. You have opportunities to do the auction again. Even if it's once a year, that doesn't mean take a bad deal just to get something. Now, if you have the means to do that, that's a completely different story, because then it isn't necessarily a bad deal. But if you're getting yourself into something you can't get out of just because you can't think in the moment, be careful. Some of these properties, especially the land, aren't going to be worth anything. So that's why I said in the beginning, it is important to know if you can build on a property. Because if you buy a land with your $4,000, $5,000, and you come to find out you can do nothing with it, what a waste. And now your property is probably going to go back to auction, because what are you going to pay the taxes on it for? You don't need it anymore. You're not going to want to do anything for it. So you have to understand that overbidding on these properties is not something that you want to get used to. There's a lot of betting going on in America right now and all of that stuff, but you can't bring it here. Strategic thinking and strategic planning for properties and for your investments are crucial. I'm talking to first-time investors. I'm no pro, but I bought land. And I bought land for $1,500. I think less than that. So I understand the process. I understand the research. I almost bought a piece of the sidewalk because I didn't do enough research. But at the end of the day, enough research helped me figure out that it was a piece of the sidewalk. Because of my curiosity, I said, man, there's no way an apartment room is going for that much. And I was looking, I'm just like, this can't be right. So I go in, do my research. I go back to my wife. I'm like, I think we might have a property. Let's look into it. So we look into the property, and it's looking good. It's looking promising. But I'm like, something ain't right, because nobody wanted this property. Okay, cool. Digging, find out it's a piece of the sidewalk. What can we do with that? I don't know. So I'm not going to invest in that. That's not my area. Somebody may find value in that, but there's no value in it for me. So I'm not even going to mess with that. Don't overbid on things that you can't back up. Don't overbid on stuff just getting into the game. It serves you no purpose to overbid on a property and you don't even know how to be an investor correctly yet. Don't put yourself in a bind. Don't put your team in a bind. Understand the investment, understand what you're doing, and understand how you can effectively manage this property to get it out of your hands. Because at the end of the day, it's all a flip in real estate, whether it's long-term or short-term. So understand what exactly you're going to do with this property. And if you have your $5,000 or $4,000 or less, and you're like, man, I found a property, but it's $6,000. But this is a really good property. Well, maybe you can overbid. Maybe you can go find another grand, have someone else invest into you, have someone else help you, and then you can go be able to get this property and actually do something with it. If you find a residential property, do what you have to do. Because now you're talking about being able to get the permits, get the licensing, get the things that you need to be able to do the stuff that you need to do on this land. If it is profitable. Now, if it's not, and it's not residential, you shouldn't really think long on it, I would say personally, because you're hindering yourself if you're trying to just get it because nobody else bid it and nobody else wanted it. And there is most likely a reason nobody else wanted it, but it's on you to figure out why these companies did their research and didn't want it, because they could have did their research and missed. I don't ever take somebody else's research or ever take everybody else saying no as a no for me. I'm going to do the most research that I possibly can to figure out what exactly is good about this property and what is bad about this property. I could care less what they think or what they know, because I can figure out more than you, and I'm willing to reach out to whoever and do whatever it takes to get to, and not in a grimy way, but do whatever it takes to get to find out what it is that is needed for me to research this property, or what it is that is needed for me to invest in this property. Because as I'm working myself up as an entrepreneur, I need to know that my investments now will yield me in the future. And it's not just something that I am doing just to do, just to say I did it. It's not going to work. So overbidding is not a tactic that we're going to preach around here. We need to understand that if you have a certain dollar amount, so once again, the $5,000, if you got that certain dollar amount, you do not exceed that threshold. You don't even bid over that, because now you're in dangerous waters. And that's another mistake that we're going to talk about in the future, is bidding on something and then not being able to pay. That'll get you in more trouble than you can think. But lastly, trying to bid in a bigger market. So when we're talking about investments and we're talking about how you wanna put your investments together and how you wanna do these lands and how you wanna be intricate about how you're gonna do things. Well, when you think about bidding in a market that's bigger than what you can even function in, it's not smart. Like, and I'll use the county that I live in all the time, Hillsborough. Hillsborough is not smart for a first-time investor. Hillsborough is made a market for middle and big-time investors. Smaller investors who can't come up with capital aren't going to do good in the Tampa market. It's just not. It's too high rising of a market for you to think you're going to do good, because some of these auction properties are going for house money. I'm talking about 140, 200, 250. And we're talking about beat down, ran down homes from the 60s and 70s going for this much that you have to put into it. And we're not talking about homes that are done already going for that. We're talking about you have to put an extra 100 grand into it, 150 into it. Big markets aren't for you as a first-time investor. Now, you can use it to see where you need to get. You can use it as motivation and aspiration to see where you need to be and see how things function at a higher level. I'm all for that. But actually trying to bid in that market serves you no purpose, because you're not going to get these properties, and you're not going to get the best properties, and you don't want to get the scum of the properties just to get a property. So we got to look around for different markets. We got to look around for smaller markets. We got to look around for the things people miss, and try to go in person. Don't make the mistake of not going in person, because Florida has no regulations on who can bid anywhere. So you can be all the way in Colorado or California bidding on a property in Hillsborough County. But if we go down the road and we go to a smaller county and we can go in person, everybody from around can't get there. So now you're bidding with 30 to 40 people, most likely even less than that, because when we went to a inside bidding auction, in-person auction, it was about 20 to 30, but only 5 to 10 were actually bidding. So understand markets. Like, even when we went in person, we went to go look at a house. And this is when I knew that looking at houses wasn't for the first-time investors, because this was our first time when we got started January last year. And we ended up buying our property like a week or two later. But we started and we were like, man, let's go figure this out. We went to the auction. And as we are in person and we're getting the knowledge of it and stuff like that, we were the first ones there. So we got the booklet of the property we wanted. We looking at it and it was really big, but we can read it. We understand real estate terminology and knowledge like that and stuff like that. So we're going through it, looking at it. We're like, okay, this is not a bad property at all. Already a house built. We just do the cosmetics. And as we're in the auction, we had cash, so we had 10 grand. And we're like, man, we got enough. And we thinking we had enough. The first person that bidded on it bidded like 35. And then the other two got into a war and he went up top like 50 and closed the deal. That's when I knew if they doing that here, it's gotta be 10 times more at Hillsborough or 10 times more down in Dade. So I look online and I'm like, whoa, they're really bidding lots of money on these. This is not the area for us. So my research and my mindset was like, let me figure out where we can put our foot at and get in the door. So we found somewhere with that had properties, but they were smaller areas, and not everybody's investing into it because population isn't high. But it's still valuable if it's residential and it's by homes. Somebody's gonna want to buy it. So we went, when we was at that auction, man, it really opened our eyes. And as we're doing that, the mistake we made then was that we thought we were going to be able to bid on something, and we thought we had more money than the big dogs. And those people came in there and was writing checks. It was doing what they needed to do. And you could tell they'd been there before. And you could tell they knew they were going to win. So to have that confidence, to have that kind of cash flow, comes with knowing what you're doing at first, because you're not going to be there right away. It takes time, and it takes people to build, and it takes people to be able to function right in their field to do stuff like this. So we know eventually we'll get there. But right now, we focus on the smaller properties that are underneath 5 grand, and we can go to about 30 or 40. But we focus on the stuff right now that we can get right now, so we can see what we can build and do with these properties rather than bidding on something we know we can't win. At the previous experience, we know we can't win. Let's not even waste our time researching these properties. If we do any type of research for those properties, it is all just for us to gain more knowledge and gain more information, just because I like doing this stuff. But we're not bidding on it. That's not our portion. So we're not going to even waste our time with that. And I want to tell you, don't bid in bigger markets than what you're ready for. Find out smaller populations in counties where you live at. Find smaller populations all over the United States. The tax auctions are happening everywhere. But you have to know what you're doing to be involved, or you can be buying a piece of crap. Thank you guys for watching, and tune in to the next video.